Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving week. Mike Swanson is on assignment. He is playing golf in Maui,
right,
with his family on a vacation that was planned months ago. So I'll do my best to fill in for him, and I'm honored to have this assignment on a truly historic day in Kansas City. Before we get started, I want to introduce the men at the front table. Royals manager Mike Matheny, Senior Vice President of Baseball Operations and General Manager Dayton Moore, Royals Chairman and CEO John Sherman, and Royals Senior Vice President of Business Operations Kevin Ulick, who would like to begin.
Stand up there. Yep. Come on up. Thank you very much, Ryan. John, why don't you stand right here? Dayton and Mike, why don't you come up front? You're the one they want to see. So, last January, Mr. Glass at FanFest called for a meeting with Dayton and myself, and it was at that meeting that he told us that the time had come and it was time for the Glass family to sell the team. And from that meeting on, it was very clear to us that there was one person that Mr. Glass really wanted to have this team. He said there was one person in Kansas City who spent most of his life here. There's one person that absolutely loves baseball and loves the Royals. There's one person that's highly respected within the Kansas City community. And best of all, he's had a chance to spend some time in Major League Baseball, owning a competitor of ours. But nevertheless, he's had a chance to actually see what Major League Baseball is all about. Well respected by the commissioner, well respected by the 29 other owners. We really could not think of anybody better to buy this team and to take it forward. So with that, Mr. Sherman, we have something that the entire Royals organization, Dayton, Mike, myself, would like to award you. You are our new number one.
I've got a spot for that, but I don't think Marnie will let me put it on over the mantle in the living room. Thank you very much.
Well, not many professional sports teams going on 50 years can say this is just the third time we've had a change at this position, any position. And yet here we are after 26 years from founding owner Ewing Kaufman, and Julia Irene is here today. Good to see you. 20 years from David Glass and his family, and now a new era as John Sherman and his investment group officially become the owners of the Kansas City Royals. And many of us are here just to see him, hear what he sounds like, because over the past few months, he became one of the most visible names in Kansas City, but somehow became the most invisible person over those past few months. So it's good to see him and his family here. Mr. Sherman, congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I've been in an undisclosed location since late August, and although I think Lynn Worthy and Sam Mellinger found me in Arlington last week, so was glad to see them. Thanks very much for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out of hiding and talk about what's ahead of us here. And I'd rather just kind of turn this over to Dayton and Mike and hear about our pitching talent coming up through the minors and other things. But I think and talk about hearing them how we compete for a championship on behalf of our fans. But I think I'm going to back up a little bit. And first off, I wish David would have called me in January, because I would have not done a couple things I did after. He didn't call me till a bit later than that. But I had a really had a great experience in Cleveland. It's a class organization, great partners, really good people, and was very, very happy in that situation. In fact, last year in spring training, and I'll talk a little bit about when David did call me, but last year we were in Goodyear for spring training, and spring training is such a great time, right? You're seeing new players come up for the first time. You've got a lot of hope for the season, and I love the way that these camps are run like academies. You're learning new things. You're bringing in new people, and so we were in Goodyear one morning, kind of meeting with our baseball ops people, talking about the future, getting ready for another championship campaign. And my phone rang. In fact, I was with we've got a couple people here that are part of this group that were partners with me in Cleveland. My phone rang. I looked down on it, and it was a call from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And of course, at my age, I'm a big target for these scammer robocalls, and they tend to all come from Arkansas for some reason. And or at best, they're going to be trying to sell me a Medicare supplement at this point. But anyway, so I ignored the call, kind of went about our business. And then later in the day, we were on our way over to the stadium. In fact, I remember it well. We were playing the Brewers that day. It was a split squad, and we actually had the other half of the team over in Surprise. And anyway, I noticed I had a voicemail. I listened to it. It was David Glass, and I'd been in our suite. Another thing great about spring training, I was in our suite, and we were just talking to Peter Gammons, which is great sports and business baseball journalist. And but anyway, I saw I had a message, and so the message was David Glass, very casual. John, if you get a chance, give me a call at your convenience. I didn't think a lot about it because we'd developed a relationship. He didn't call me very often, but I was curious. So anyway, I called David. He said, John, I want to give you a heads up. The family's decided to sell the team. Don't know if my timing's right with Cleveland, but you would be my first choice. I think you'd be great for Kansas City. And, of course, I just told you what I was doing. I was preparing with the Cleveland Indians for a championship season, so the wheels were spinning, pretty quickly. So I got off the phone. I didn't go back in and talk to Peter Gammons. I actually took a walk around the stadium to think about this a little bit. But anyway, long story short, called David back a few days later. I told him we would try to make this work. He said, that's great news. If you try to make it work, I'll do everything in my power to make it happen for you. I had to talk to my partner in Cleveland and the commissioner. Everybody kind of coalesced around that, and we went to work. And these are complex transactions. This took a while. This call was back in, it was early in spring training. I'm looking at Brooks, but we've been kind of heads down on this deal for about 6 months now, and got it closed yesterday. But I guess a couple of things. First of all, I really want to express my appreciation for David Glass, one, for giving us this extraordinary opportunity, but also what he's done for Kansas City, and not just for bringing a World Series championship back here, but for what he did helping Ewing Kauffman kind of navigate that transition back in the 90s, which was very, very important time. So great, big thanks to the David Glass and his family. I'm also very thankful for Ewing Kauffman. Julia, I asked Julia to come today. Thanks for coming. It means a lot to me, Julia. But Ewing Kauffman, he's someone that had some influence on me. I serve with Julia at his foundation today. Our first company actually was a finalist for the Mr. K Award back in the, when was that, early 90s? Early 90s. And so learned a lot about his philosophy and had an impact on me. Very simple. It was about how you treat people, how you reward people, and that you give back to the community. He said it a little differently, but I thought that's very simple. And you think about business, we all put these mission statements on the wall and enshrine them, but really it's pretty simple. And I really thought that those three principles told me a lot about why the business was successful. He's also gone on to, you think about Mr. Kauffman, maybe we wouldn't have the Royals, wouldn't have Kauffman Stadium, wouldn't have the foundation, wouldn't have the Kauffman Center for the Performing Arts, which is another great asset in our city.
And Mrs. K's foundation.
And Mrs. K's Foundation, that's right, which Julia leads, and she also leads the Kaufman Performing Arts Center, which not only is it a world-class performing arts center, it's well managed both from an operational and financial standpoint, and that's not the case around the country. So the community has continued to benefit from their family's work. I also asked Bob Kendrick to come today. I think it's another treasured asset in our community is the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. If you've ever had a chance to go over there, they tell this. It's a great story. They tell it great. While it's about baseball on one hand, it transcends baseball. And if you walk through there with, I almost said walk through there with Buck, but but if you walk through there with Bob, you kind of feel like Buck is taking a stroll with you. So I think that's an important part of our city and our baseball heritage. I think I'm right that the leagues were founded in 1920. Monarchs were an initial franchise, if they called them franchises. But so next year will be the 100th year anniversary of professional, Negro Leagues baseball in Kansas City. There should be something to celebrate next year. Talk a little bit about the ownership group. There's lots of things I like about the way this deal came together for us. The opportunity to do this in your hometown is very, very special. And so Brooks and I began to raise the capital for this transaction. We focused on Kansas City. The bankers that do this in sports told us you'd probably be able to raise most of it here in Kansas City, but you might have to go to New York or Chicago or somewhere else. Well, we raised it all here in Kansas City. 100% of the group either runs their business here, built their careers here, raising their family here, or they grew up here and have a connection to Kansas City and the Royals, and this was a way for them to reconnect. This is maybe the historians can correct me, but I think until the Nationals just won the World Series, I believe that we're the only franchise from the 1969 expansion class to have won a World Series. And we've been to 4, and we've won 2. I mean, it is a proud and storied franchise. In fact, George Brett, I had lunch with George about a week ago, a generational player, Hall of Famer. And we reminisced about that first pitch that he hit off of Goose Gossage in 1980 into the upper deck in Yankee Stadium. I think I was in a bar in Westport when I watched it on some... You couldn't have been. But on some grainy television up in the... But it was... I remember that night. I was 25 years old, and the horns were honking late into the night. You would have thought we won the World Series that night. And so that was, and there have been a lot of special moments. And then certainly the 14 or 15 run, was a lot of fun. And I think the All-Star game, I had the sense that when we had the All-Star game in, was at 12, that kind of baseball was on the comeback here, and then the Royals did it on the field. I'd like to... I just say our objectives, and I'll let Mike and after this meeting, I'm going to let Mike and Dayton keep you updated. But our objectives are to compete for a championship on behalf of our fans. I've heard Mike say it, and I've heard Dayton say it. That we're going to try to do it on a sustainable basis and have sustained success. I feel. I want to open this up for questions, but I feel incredibly fortunate today to be sitting in this seat. But I also realize the privilege and responsibility that we have in this seat on behalf of our fans, our players and coaches, our associates, and our community. I look forward to the challenge. Thank you. That's great.
Before we get to the questions, I'd like to share with some of you a picture. Many of you have seen it. You probably have seen it many times, and now you just walk right by it. This is April 12th, 1955, Municipal Stadium. This is the first game for the Kansas City A's. That's then former President Truman throwing out the first pitch. It was a game with the A's and the Tigers. And when we learn more about Mr. Sherman and Mr. Glass's relationship, the word hand-picked keeps coming up. Among many responsibilities that Mr. and Mrs. Sherman have taken on for the good of our city is the Truman Library Institute. And Mr. Sherman was the chairman of the board, member of the board for 9 years, and I believe Mrs. Sherman is still a member, correct? So obviously, President Truman and his legacy is very important to him and his family. So in this picture right here, you could say that modern Major League Baseball was born in Kansas City, April 12, 1955. John Sherman was born on April 12, 1955. So how's that for hand-picked? And I believe you have this in your house, correct? Yeah.
My office.
Okay, before we get to questions, since we are sitting underneath the Royals Hall of Fame, I would like to officially acknowledge two very special people here today, Hall of Famers. Mr. Sherman mentioned George Brett, who's sitting up front with Julia Irene Kaufman, and Denny Matthews, who is very modestly sat in the back of the room, are two Royals Hall of Famers and Baseball Hall of Famers. So